welcome you all to this webinar on monitoring and evaluation. Here today we have, I am Jasmine. I am an alumni of the Niti cohort, which just very recently graduated from ISPP. And, I would like to welcome our panelists today, in which we have Dr. Shekhar, we have Archana Pillai, and, we have Dr. Himanshu here with us. And so, sorry, just a minute, I am having some inconvenience here. So first of all, I'll start with Dr. Bonu here. Dr. Bonu has been former Director General DMEO and Niti Aayog. And before joining Niti Aayog, Dr. Bonu worked with Asian Development Bank in Manila from 2004 to 2019. During his tenure lasting 15 years,
I think Jasmine is struggling with some technical issues. Okay, so no issues. We can move on. Dr. Pillai, we can start with you. Dr. Pillai is the moderator for this webinar. And our two panelists are Dr. Shekhar Bonu and Himanshu Dube. So over to you, Dr. Pillai.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Good evening, everybody, and welcome again to this discussion on M&D. I think everybody here has monitoring and evaluation very close to their heart, and I think it is but a great beginning to have Dr. Bonu come in. He said very rightly that he's ex-Niti Aayog, and therefore we should mention that he was with Niti Aayog. But thank you, sir, for joining. He was the former director of the Monitoring and Evaluation Office of Niti Aayog. He comes with a background. He was a former IS officer, worked for many years and then left the services, went on to work at the ADB, the Asian Development Bank, for 15 years, and has a PhD in public health from Johns Hopkins. Other than that, I think all of us have benefited. I have benefited a lot by listening to various sessions that the DMEO does, you speaking in multiple platforms. And I think as a leader and as as somebody who has been leading this sector, understanding specifically in M&D from a very, very national standpoint, looking at large-scale evaluations, which the country has run, and centering the attention to an office where accountability, transparency has been very high. Thank you so much, sir, for taking the time out. Within the very, very first week of you retiring, I don't know whether it's retirement in that sense of the term, but I'm hoping that the retirement is going to lead to some more exciting times for all of us with you. Thank you for coming in and sharing. And we'll try and our best to see how we can learn from this experience.
Thank you so much.
Himanshu's here. Let me also introduce Himanshu. Himanshu is, Himanshu comes from the Inside Development Consulting Group. He's an executive director, which specializes in monitoring and evaluation, institutional strengthening, and project management. And he just told me as we were beginning this conversation that he has nearly 3 decades of experience in the development sector, working with governments, funding agencies, private and not-for-profit organizations. He has designed, developed, and led a lot of M&D assignments across the sectors, across the country, across international assignments in areas like environment, climate, energy, education. So I think the whole gamut of activities, including working in remote locations and with a lot of cultural diversity. And I'm happy to see this as well, that he's developed a lot of M&D frameworks, which I think a lot of us in the sector have had to do as we worked over a period of time in a space where M&D has always been a residual function. And that, I think, is one of the core issues that we want to discuss in the group today. So welcome, Himanshu. Thank you for taking the time out again and being here. And I think the theme that we have, just a little bit of, before I get into the theme, I'll also introduce myself a little bit on my background. So I basically studied economics and taught economics for many years. I have a PhD in economics too. But I think social sector work was something that I was really keen on doing. And when I decided to take time out of academics, I wanted to know what I should do. And it automatically became measurement. And that was one area where I found very little understanding and work being done. And that really taught me, took me to that side. I started working in social audits. I specialized in social audits first and then started doing social audit work. then CSR work. And over the last 5 years, I've spent time with a lot of incubation programs in the south of India, largely. I mean, I'm based out of NSR Celadai in Bangalore, and I also advise the Nudge Foundation on its many programs, but also do some impact assessment. So for me, this is also very, very, I would say, close to my heart. I also have taught the ISPP students a little, so I understand that excitement as well. So I'm happy to moderate this with the two of you, specifically because I will get to ask questions that I get fielded, and hope that we will together find some answers, and we will take it that way. That's fine. As a format, I was thinking we will have maybe the three of us talk a little bit, maybe 2 to 3 minutes about the development sector landscape. I think that's important to set context, and then I have, as I said, some specific questions, and we can open it up to the audience as it goes, if that's okay with the both of you. Yeah. All right.
Sure.
Yeah. So Dr. Bonu, we'll start with you. I think what I was wanting to do is, since we're talking about M&D and how M&D is influencing the policy landscape, I said even before we start policy landscape, is it possible for us to, let's say, with your experience, talk a little bit about how the development sector itself has evolved, in your experience over the years, and how has it changed specifically in the last few years in the Indian context? Sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Archana, for the very generous introduction. And I'm also equally excited to join this panel and talk to the colleagues from Indian School of Public Policy. So over the past 3 decades, I think India has made remarkable progress in the development sphere. Yeah, sometimes we try to compare ourselves with China, and we might find that the pace is slightly slower, but we need to acknowledge that India is a very different country. We have a different polity, and given the context in which we are working, I think we have done remarkably well. In the last 7, 8 years, I think the speed has only accelerated further. I say that because if you look at the differences between NFHS 5, 4, and 5, we see remarkable progress in terms of universalization of electricity, universalization, bank account, the empowerment of women, yeah, and so forth. So I think there is some
so just 1 second. May I request everybody else to please turn themselves on mute? I don't know the participant.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah, okay, it's muted now. So but still, we have a number of challenges, and we want to achieve SDGs. We also have in a context of climate change. So clearly, we really need to improve our public expenditure efficiencies, make sure that the targeting is done well, especially where we are providing subsidies and targeted programs. So a strong theory of change along with a strong logical framework, and using IT to the hilt to build strong monitoring systems, and then time to time concurrent as well as end-line evaluations are very important, so that the data can feed into our policy making as well as programs. So clearly we have done great, but we still have a lot of challenges, which means that we need to do even better.
Thank you, sir. Himanshu.
Yeah, thanks, Archana. I'm delighted to be here on this panel. Thanks to ISPP, Ashish, and you. Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I often talk about, or when we talk amongst friends, is that we live a life that was unimaginable 30 years ago when we were studying. The quality of life that we had, the sort of everything. I mean, from our ambitions, what we thought that we could achieve and what we have achieved, a lot of that changed, and that's largely because of sort of the development change that has come into India in these past years. I mean, our complete way of thinking, looking at how, where we are, where in the world we can be, I think that has completely changed. And whatever that you look at, whether we look at electricity, water, we look at infrastructure, we look at some of our education and health attainments, that change is so palpable to see. I mean, just to imagine, almost 78 years ago when we got independent, our life expectancy was around 40. It is reaching 70 now. We have eradicated diseases, but sort of the education levels have gone up significantly. And this life that we have lived in the last 30 odd years since liberalization has been a game changer, not only for us as Indians and our country, but across the world, positioning India at a completely different level. So I think, and that is what has changed in development overall.
Right. Thank you. And I mean, I don't have the number of years that both of you have, but I've seen the last few years. And I think one of the most exciting things I have seen in the last few years is the professionalizing of the sector. Because of a lot of younger quality talent moving into the development space directly, and maybe even corporates, who early career shifts that we're beginning to see. I think that has brought in, especially from the nudge perspective and at NSRCell, we see a lot of young talent. I mean, one of the reasons I like working with these people is they're extremely entrepreneurial, very, very committed early on. And I think that's, that along with the change in landscape, the energy they bring is very, very ready for change. And I think that's something that has actually added a little bit more of zing to this whole, space of measurement. I think because you understand people who understand how to use data, like Dr. Bonu said, no, data seems to be out there. You said data is there, but now we have people who are sensitive to how the data should be used as well. And they're excited. So there seems to be that. There's also a lot of, I guess, with younger organizations that I have been mentoring, and we mentor organizations at NAJ and at SRCell, which are early stage. And we see a lot of reason for them, like you said, Dr. Bonu, to do a TOC right in the beginning. Unlike where results-based, the RBF was what was popular earlier, today we are saying we define matrices even as we start. We're not really looking at a, end of period evaluation. But that kind of mindset has also come in because there's excitement about it. And we can definitely talk about what are the, barriers to that thinking. But working with this kind of a landscape, I think, as both of you pointed out, has helped bring in that energy. So at least, as you said, the country feels ready for, more work in this space, more talent being attracted to the space. So to that extent, the context is where we are. So my first question from there on, and I think this is to Dr. Bonu, a little bit of context to the question, because we talk a lot about data, we talk about transparency, we talk about evidence, and we talk about declaration of publication. So we're saying that there is data, there is the need to be transparent, there's a lot of evidence that needs to be gathered. And in that context, you have been part of large-scale evaluations. You have seen, there's no need to say the size of the work that the Niti Aayog has been doing. Where do you think, like, for example, most of this data or this the analytics that comes in, how have you seen that change policy, or has it changed program? And if you can quote one or two examples, I know it will be difficult to maybe point out one or two, but that would probably help us, see how it has actually changed. Sir.
Yeah. So basically, I've been at the helm of Development Monitoring Evaluation Office. So we used to do both monitoring and evaluation. When I joined, we were at the juncture where the 14th Finance Commission was ending and 15th Finance Commission was beginning. So there is a government policy that no scheme will move from one Finance Commission cycle to the next Finance Commission cycle without a third-party independent evaluation. So as a part of it, we did the 125 centrally sponsored scheme evaluation, which was massive. And definitely, I would, DMEO could do a lot of this work of high quality, largely because the human resources policies were in place. So we could bring a lot of lateral talent into DMEO. So I just want to reinforce what you have said, Dr. Archana, that there's huge amount of talent among the IT professionals, among all these youngsters, who come out, very good talent in economics, statistics, methods, research methods, and so forth. and under good mentoring, they deliver outsized results. So I just want to reinforce that. So whatever we did, one of the important component was talented, capable staff coming laterally into Niti Aayog. So we did, but the points I want to emphasize, evaluation is not about passing judgments. It's not about regulation or auditing, it's about putting our wisdom together and learning, everyone coming together with a broader objective of doing a better job for this nation. I think the ministries and departments, the colleagues there are also struggling hard. I don't think they want to take the program in different direction. And also we need to understand that in a political economy like ours, where there is huge competition to come up with ideas quickly and generate programs, many times the programs are not piloted, not fully tested, and they are supposed to be implemented. And there are a lot of implementation challenges. So there are design issues, there are implementation issues. So it's not about saying whether a program has worked or not. It's about trying to figure out where, if it has worked, how is that, where it has worked. If it has not worked, where it has failed in terms of design. Because no one has a full answer for everything. We are just struggling hard. India is such a diverse country, and the implementation takes place in a diverse context in many ways, So what can work in one place can't work. So given that, I think we need to be humble. We need to say that our understanding is limited. Our tools are also limited. Not everything can be quantitatively judged. There are a lot of things that we can't quantitatively do analysis, where qualitative sciences like anthropology, sociology, political sciences, all these things come in play. So what most important, the evaluating agency need to have some empathy. It's you can easily go and say you failed. That's not the point. The point is try to do a deeper understanding. The people who have implemented also have a lot of wisdom. We need to collect their wisdom, put it together, and then introspect, and then there is a lot of ownership to your evaluation. And then there is once there is ownership, they will use your evaluation to improve the next phase of program design and implementation. So that is precisely what we have done. We were humble. We knew that our office doesn't have all the skill set, but if we can put everyone together, we will come up with a better product. So we reached out to the department, we reached out to the experts outside, we reached out to whoever it is possible. We did extensive literature review to understand what is the current knowledge status, so that we pulled it all together, then supplemented it with qualitative research and also quantitative research wherever it was possible. So in a way, there was huge, because it was co-created. It's not about some independent agency coming and trying to judge. So it was co-created, there was ownership, and it was in the next, while the programs were coming for monitoring, a lot of our recommendations were incorporated by the ministry's departments. But more important, the Ministry of Finance, Department of Expenditure also owned it. They used our reports to further put some pressure on the ministries and departments to improve. But we also need to understand that we live in a constrained environment. There are political constraints under democracy. Not always optimal solutions are things which can work. So then you negotiate and push the boundaries to the extent possible. So I can confidently say that a lot of our findings were incorporated. I will not say that it was our findings. It was joint findings. It was a group. It was all stakeholders putting their wisdom together and figuring out, and in doing so, we did a job which was more acceptable. So it's humility, it's empathy, it's about commitment for what evaluation stand. We want to do something which is very important for this country. And if we can come together around that goal, I think we can do a much, much better job.
Right. Thank you, sir. I think very nice to hear words that, it's something that we all want to work with. That is, as an agency, go in with empathy. As an agency, don't go in with just to judge, because I'm sure there's a lot of constraints that we can't. And I'm going to take you up on the quant versus qual debate a little later, because that's something that's also very close to my heart, because we hear that a lot in the space. But just to pull up from where you said, and Himanshu, if we can take this conversation a little further, working from, maybe putting this whole thing in an international perspective, and you guys have worked, and your team has worked internationally, probably you have done assignments. When you look at the same thing in a dev context outside India, and when you look at the same kind of work, what culture do you see different in that context versus here? So, and is there anything that is striking which says, value judgment wise, this is better, not so good, what we should work on from all the data ethicality and perspective? I mean, we heard Dr. Bonu talk about from a government standpoint and how that makes a difference. But as an outside evaluator, what is that you see in culture and value and systems that comes in?
Yeah. So, Archana, I think one of the sort of M&E, as I understand, when I started working, it was something that had, my first assignment was actually to do a baseline survey for project affected people from of a resettlement project, a hydro resettlement project. That baseline survey happened, was getting conducted 5 years after the land had been acquired. So it was a World Bank funded project in Himachal Pradesh. And since then, I've worked on a number of these assignments in India, some of them internationally. M&E seems to be the cornerstone everywhere. I mean, all funding agencies, they have a M&E component. There's a dedicated budget, about 4 to 8%, sometimes over about 10%. A significant amount of that budget is devoted to monitoring. And a lot of that is what generates program or sort of a program or project implementation data at various levels. Their budgets dedicated for creating MIS, their budgets for analyzing and reporting that, and obviously their budgets for evaluation, and that entire evaluation cycle that we see of baseline, midline, endline, that has been fairly common. Increasingly, there is another instrumentality that seems to be getting popularized, which is independent verifications or third-party monitoring conducted through sample surveys to assess the achievement of outputs or outcomes. And based on these these verification reports, monitoring reports, a proportion of the loans that have been taken up by the borrowing agencies are disbursed to them. I mean, we were working on a number of assignments like that. It's almost like a success fee or impact funding. One of the other aspects that, in fact, Dr. Bonu also talked of is about piloting. In fact, we have seen a number of assignments, and we have been part of it, where pilots are getting conducted with a significant amount of rigor to M&E, or at least monitoring the M&E rigor in it, data, how's that sort of the pilot design, how can we make it more effective? They're looking at time periods of up to 2 years, which are for these pilots to work out, to ensure that whenever something is getting wide scaled or upscaled, it is getting there is enough learning which has gone in. It is collaborative. There are a number of levels of discussions at the sort of the team which is front-ending the project, to even sort of internal quality assurance teams that a number of international organizations have. And these are practices which are sort of getting deployed across the world by international agencies, be it in Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, Southern and Central America. I mean, the Pacific Islands, we see them all over, and we keep looking at them, finding reports of things that are happening.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for that, both of you, in context. And that leads me to one of the areas which have been of concern. I mean, I work a lot closely with the nudge teams, and especially with some of our work in the field. And one of the concerns that I see with younger organizations, and I'm not talking about development agencies or government, one of the concerns, and if I may represent that, is M&D budgets. Like you said, 4 to 8 to 10%. A lot of time, program or donors and grants don't account for monitoring and evaluation as a budget expenditure. I mean, as an expenditure item, largely because it's not part of program design. We've been struggling, and I'm not saying no, because it's in the last few years we've had to evaluate programs, but not just evaluate, as you said, monitor programs. And I think Dr. Bonu said that the E part is not as much as regular monitoring is, and it has been difficult to get that in, not because of the culture, but also because of the amount of money that should be set aside for that purpose. So budget. One is M&D from a large, bigger agency point is, as you said, World Bank, any of the international development proposals will have it already budgeted in, whereas you don't see that largely in other local, national level, I would say CSR grants or any other smaller grants that we receive. Very difficult. So question I had was, and Dr. Bonu, this is because you've also seen the policy landscape so closely, is there something that can be done from a policy perspective? And I know that the social stock exchange policy note at some states said 5 to 10%, but that's about it. But other than allocation, what would make M&D move from being a residual function at smaller agency level, not at the national level, to being a core activity? Like, is there a policy requirement there that should be, policy angle there, or what will help? So from your experience, how do you think we can change that thinking and that allocation?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Archana. I think as a society, I think we don't give data the importance we should. I think we still, most of the decision making is run on intuition based on hierarchy and less on data, So as a society, I think we need to move more towards evidence. So that means we need to collect more data. So probably that is that quality or that lack of emphasis is reflected instinctively in the designs that we make, whether it's in private sector. So if someone who is a grantee doesn't value it, why would they give importance to it? So I think it's not about small entities in private sector. I think it's across. So one, as a nation, as we move forward, we need to move from intuition, hierarchy-based decision making to more evidence-based policy making and evidence-based program management, and for which we need to have much better data architectures. Okay, so having said that, maybe as a nation which was struggling to deal with thousands of challenges with limited funds, we were more focused on delivery rather than setting up these systems. So, but now we are moving from lower middle income country to higher middle income country. We have a lot more flexibility in our budgets. Then we also have a very strong IT system. India is endowed with extreme talent, IT talent. We are the we supply so much of human resources for across the world. Our people set up all the M&E systems across. So I think there's a great opportunity now. So how do we start? How do we start? And how do we make it happen? So in government, I can say, how did we do it? When we started, there is commitment to delivering outcomes and building accountability around outcomes. But unfortunately, these have to be part of the design. If they are not part of the design, I can come as an evaluator at later at 5 years, and I'm struggling to figure out what are the outcomes, what are the outputs, and what are the data sources, and so forth. So quality at entry is extremely critical. So that means we have to, our academics, our intellectuals, everyone, I think our government servants, everyone need to lay out emphasis on clear theory of change and setting up a good 2 or 3 page, logical framework, where you talk about inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impacts, clearly define what are the data sources that you are going to use, and also, what are the risks and assumptions. The whole problem I find is that when you have too many small fragmented programs, and you are trying to do complicated things, where it's very difficult, there's so much of noise in the system. Government of India is doing, state governments are doing, you are also, some others are also doing, private sector is also doing. So how are you going to figure out, that this intervention of yours has led to these outcomes? So there are also lots of challenges there. So that's why I feel, lesser emphasis on quants. I know that West is very, very obsessed with quantitative
Quantitative rate process.
Their societies are much more predictable. Their institutions are much more homogeneous. India is very
Right.
different. We need to have our own
Yes.
different systems. So what I'm saying is
Right.
that I think there's a larger issue. You can't address these things by coming up with some fancy policy. I think the whole ecosystem has to work together. Definitely, as I left, we were trying to work on a policy on monitoring evaluation, and hopefully, but it needs to have strong ownership across so that it can succeed. So yes, I agree, we need policy, but all of us, academia, training institutions, philanthropy, private sector, government, all the key stakeholders have to come together as we push ourselves towards data-driven, evidence-based society.
Thank you, sir, for that. And I think it's right that you said that, that feeling that it comes a lot internally, that they need to do it, and ownership. I think you've mentioned this word quite a lot, which is also what we're trying to push through training, right? And at least in our largest programs, we've been trying. There is a lot of third-party eval happening, but we do a lot of internal capacity building also in this direction. And I see where you're coming from. Also, maybe the expectation is that now, since you're not at Niti Aayog, you will probably be one of those people influencing the others, in the sector, saying this is important, and maybe that's something we look forward to get your support on, because this understanding, even among large donors or philanthropists, and I just for the sake of the mention, the very senior CSR head from a very large corporation said, if I have to give you money for evaluation, I'll give it to program instead. And I'm like, it's not an either or. And that's how he spoke to me like that, saying, oh, why should I give you money to evaluate? And it is, so again, not the condescension of it, but the fact that it's not important. So I think that's where, what you said will become not necessarily policy, but a lot of influence as well. Taking this conversation, Himanshu, now, I'm sure you've seen this side too, where a lot of times we are struggling on the RFPs or others by saying, well, this is what we do. And what we do has purpose. It's not like we're doing it because we fancy being auditors. It's not like, and as you said, the lens is more in terms of, like Dr. Bonu said, to establish whether those outcomes have been accomplished, and basically to say, is the program on the right track? I think that's the purpose of this assessment. So what kind of pushbacks have you seen? And what do you think, which stakeholders should we work with a little bit more to change that thinking?
See, I think most of my work has been with funding agencies or government officials who are implementing some of these large borrower-driven programs. I think despite the international agencies having a very, very strong focus on M&E, the value of M&E is not well appreciated by those by the professionals who lead those task teams or lead those projects within the funding agencies themselves. It is important for them because at a lot of times, if you have nice if you have data, if you have reports that help them sort of get there, or sort of to prove that their targets have been achieved, they're very happy with it. But if those targets have not been achieved and there is an independent evaluation team which is saying it's not been achieved, the evaluation team is in trouble, right? I have a very old story. I was evaluating one of my second or third assignments early in my career. I was not even 25 years old. I was evaluating I was doing the baseline survey for World Bank's ICDS program in undivided Madhya Pradesh. We sort of sampled almost 10,000 children, 8,000 case, 2,000 in control. We came up with significant amount of data. All of that got analyzed and we presented it. Somehow that data did not match with what the MIS system was saying, what the state MIS was saying. So we didn't get paid for almost 9 months. Till eventually their own MIS system got toned up and started throwing the same data or for something equivalent. And that is when they realized that the evaluation team was not saying something that was incorrect. So consulting firms, the first thing is your payments get delayed, which means that your entire sort of viability of the organization goes for a toss. So that is our biggest challenge. Secondly, I think most sort of uh, uh, implementers do not realize, or they look at M&E from a very shallow perspective, that there is a report that has to be submitted because that's part of their overall institutional mandate that they have to pass. And M&E becomes very siloed. There's no linkage with plans. I mean, what do you monitor? You monitor a plan. You cannot monitor anything out of the blue. I mean, you need a plan to monitor. So your plan it has to be fairly strategic on what you're trying to achieve, your outcomes, your impacts, what are the inputs that are required, how do you reach those outputs to get to those outcomes and impacts. So that is that element is missing. The other aspect of learning and adaptation.
Yes.
I mean, they won't want to talk to you. I mean, I have clients who say, oh, you've written this, it's okay. Either we have got the report, which is fine, or if the report is not fine, why have you written this? It's not going back, trying to drill down on why happened, why this has happened. And eventually, I mean, at the end of it, the greatest pushback that you face, and especially in the private sector, we face is delayed payments. And delayed payments is because the clients do not want to hear what the evidence is trying to let them know. Because, I mean, as we use the word audit, people think it's an audit, and I mean, it's reflecting badly on them. At some cases it would, because I'm sure somewhere they have their accountability requirements, their assessment requirements as well, which is important for them to show that this project succeeded, it achieved its targets, but it may not. And as Professor Dr. Bonu has been saying, I mean, we are a complex country and there are too many variables. So even if we were to do with use that empathy is not well received.
Or reciprocated, maybe.
Or reciprocated, because there's something not right. Why are you telling me this? You have not done this job well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I see that sense, right? So I mean, I get where you're coming from also. So yes, as Dr. Bonu said, and as you've been saying, I think that's a culture that we're beginning to change. I mean, it is taking a little bit of time and a push, but at least in the last 2 years, I mean, I thought during COVID, we will have less need to do this kind of work. We have done distance third-party evaluations, like doing Zoom-based focus groups and all that. I don't think it was something we could have thought of, but there has been pressure. I mean, on smaller orgs as well to even think of it. I just came from a boot camp at IIM Bangalore, where we're working with very young startups on, and their question is, do I need an M&D person in my organization? Like, do I need to look at M&D? And I'm like, if you're running an org, you need monitoring done. Like, okay, can I do it after a few years? No, you have to do it right now. So,
something that I keep telling, and a lot of these young people are engineers, especially those in technology.
Right.
And one of the things that they learn is production planning and control.
Right.
I'm not an engineer, but I understand all engineers have to learn about production planning and control.
Right.
M&E is just that, production planning and control. Right. You have your MIS, you have your inputs, your outputs. What are you going to achieve? I mean, that entire chain is just a sort of a reflection of what they learn as production planning and control when they are doing their engineering. Yeah, so maybe you could use that example later.
No, I mean, I will definitely bring another example later when I do quant versus qual, and that's where I want to go. Not quant versus qual, quant plus qual. So, Dr. Bonu and Himanshu, this is something I think all of us in the sector have seen. Because M&D practice comes largely from a Western influence. I mean, and I'm saying that because the M&D literature, whether it is journals, academic, peer-reviewed work, or JPAL, lead the whole thing by saying, unless it is quantifiable and measurable, it is not worth reporting, which is not true. I mean, and I also am a student of economics, but having worked in the development space, I think, like you said, it's more anthropology, sociology, it is public administration. There's an entire gamut of things that you need to also think through. So this is something we face all the time. I'm sure when you start working with clients, you'll say, okay, how many surveys are you going to do? Where is the quant data set? Like, what tools are you going to use? And I'm like, do we even know why we're doing that? So in your experience and evolution of the space, Dr. Bonu, where do you think, and you said this partly earlier in a passing comment, and I want to pull on that. What is important when you look at evaluation? Is methodology the key, or something else where I start and methodology is just a fix to manage it? How do you approach any of these designs? And how would you suggest we approach?
What I'm saying is that methodology is very, very important. Only thing is that we also need to understand the limitations of the methodology and maximize it. So clearly, this emphasis on impact evaluation, I think there is too much overemphasis on impact evaluation. Impact evaluation is talking about yes or no solutions. No, development is not yes or no. I mean, it has different shades. So maybe you wanted to do 5 things, out of which 3 you succeeded, but you also created some positive externalities which led to institution building, and which you probably didn't mention it in your original logical framework. But as a curious person, I think it's very important for us to document them also. The problem with many of these evaluations I find, because I was on the other side of evaluation in Asian Development Bank, वो कहते हैं लकीर का फकीर type. So they pick up some logical framework which was written 7 or 8 years back, which when obviously, when you want to get a project done, you are always optimistic. Otherwise, if you are very, very conservative, you don't even get funds. So then they will say, acha, ye bola to your failure because you did not achieve the logical framework. And if you come up with that type of conclusions with no empathy, no understanding, you just need to put yourself, evaluator need to put themselves in the program implementers' place, and then figure out, whether you can do a better job than what these people have done, given the constraints. Where you need 100 people, the program allows only 4 or 5 people to execute. So you are trying to optimize it to the extent possible. So this is where I'm saying that there is need for empathy. And if you don't have, and you try to be, you take yourself independent evaluation too seriously, then I think you are alienating. And in doing so, I'm telling you, no evaluator has any knowledge about any of the sectors they evaluate. They have cross-cutting knowledge of monitoring and evaluation, but there are sector-specific issues, which you only can learn while you are on the job, because you will do electricity sector this year, you move on to do something else. So that means you need to be open, you need to be humble, you need to talk to all the stakeholders, put yourself in their position and figure out can you do a better job there. So once you start behaving that way, you will start winning the confidence, you will start winning the respect of the people. And then and there is a way to write, you just can't say that you have failed, you are useless, you can put the same thing in a different manner. First of all, you appreciate the good things that have happened, then come down to what are the areas which can be improved. There are lots of areas, even God comes, nothing is going to happen, and that's the political economy of the country. So the point I want to say, we really have a scope during this process to build credibility, build the trust. And in doing so, we do co-create knowledge, because we are also very dependent on our stakeholders to create the knowledge, and also try to figure out what are the other benefits the program has generated outside the so-called logical framework, and then give some credit to it. Then these people will start realizing that this person who has come to evaluate has an open mind. And the other part I feel is monitoring and evaluation is so critical for any function. If you are a chief executive officer of a large multilateral, if you want to succeed, monitoring and evaluation is critical. Monitoring, without monitoring, how can Jeff Bezos build Amazon, across the world? So he has understood what are the key performance metrics, and he's monitoring on a daily basis. And that's how I think he has created such an empire. And evaluation is slightly different, but you have concurrent evaluation, you have end-line evaluation. So I feel that monitoring and evaluation is important as a separate function, but also I think it's a mainstream skill set which is required for anyone to succeed in their professional life. So those are 2 things I just wanted to emphasize. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Himanshu.
Yeah, so taking forward from what Dr. Bonu said, there are times when you come across a situation where the client itself is thinking that something, that what you're reporting, something has failed. I have 2 very interesting examples. A few years back, we were trying to evaluate a microfinance intervention, a CSR in Delhi, in which a number of self-help groups were set up. The women were trained and they were imparted training, and a lot of them became very confident, and self-help groups were working. But one of the other things was happening was that many women exited self-help groups, especially the one who probably had evolved better, gained more confidence, gained mobility. And the implementing agency thought it was a failure, that they have not been able to retain the beneficiaries in the self-help group. Pillai said that this is probably your biggest success story, that your beneficiaries have become independent. They don't even need a group. As independent professionals, they can go out and they can negotiate the world at their and the space in their own way, in their own manner. Another example, which very recently we were trying to evaluate sugar intervention, a sugar cane intervention in Maharashtra. The funding agency, which had trained the extension officers, had not only had provided training to obviously the control set, but eventually they were also recruited by the Maharashtra government, and they provided training to the beneficiaries or the non-beneficiaries, but government beneficiaries in the case subset.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
When we did the end line, there was no major difference between case and control, because the extension happened to people who were not direct beneficiaries of the project, because it happened through a different mechanism. Attribution was a huge issue. It took us a lot of discussion, trying to collaboratively to make them understand, empathize, make them understand that this is probably your biggest success story. That the control has also achieved something similar from your intervention, because the people that you trained went out and wide scaled and upscaled what you're doing. The spread effect was there.
Yeah, the spillovers that we say, right? I mean, that does happen.
The spread effect was there. So, like Dr. Bonu said, Lakir ka fakir. So many of these are just Lakir. Many of times the design is Lakir ka fakir, and you don't want to step out of it, and you start considering, oh, we have not done this, so we have failed. But that's not true.
That's true. No, and just to add, I think we've seen that, like last few evaluations that we have done. I mean, we do a lot of not just end line, but over the program evaluation study as well. And one of the things that we see, the M&D word having R and L, that is research and learning, that they call it the MERL landscape now, right? So L is there, and I have seen, like Dr. Bonu, you said, we've worked with teams where they have used the data collection tools that we give them to continue to collect data. So, it has been a learning curve. I have also seen agencies change program midway. Like we do a lot of pilots and programs have changed. So that sensitivity is there. As I said, there is maybe the willingness is there from the type of the team based on, as you're saying, if I go in saying I'm an ally, I want to really work with you. The idea is to help you have a better report. At the end of the day, there is a report we're definitely talking about, but we're also going to try and see, can we change? So we also do this, what you just said, right? So the LFA or the TOC that was created, we try and do an evaluation TOC saying, okay, you started with this, let's do one now and say how it has changed and see whether you have data around it. I mean, I am currently doing an evaluation for human trafficking, which is again an area, like you said, I'm not an expert and I don't understand trafficking and dynamics, and it's such a complex and sensitive area, and it's a multi-state evaluation that we're currently doing. We had to really work hard first to get the framework right, like, think through because it's not trafficking, success is not less trafficking, because that's not the answer there. It's not like, less number of FIRs or less number of cases, because that's data is not something that's available. So the agency, the funding agency, which is an international agency, said, why should I continue to support them? Help us understand. And so we had to go in and say, let's look at what has changed. So vulnerability indices that have changed, or sensitivity to these things that have changed. So it takes a little bit more effort even to understand and design a framework for evaluation first before making a judgment on it. And there I am with you here. It required us and our team to be on the field with the grassroots professionals who were doing it, because statewide, I couldn't have a statewide common framework. We actually did state-specific variables, because we find migration a concern in Bengal, but not really called out as migration. Whereas child marriage as another area, So I get where you're coming from, and I think that is where what we're trying to also push over a period of time in the little work that we do across sectors is invest in learning the behavioral manifestations. I mean, look at the behavioral outcomes as well, and not just the tangible number changes. And that is where I think my question on data was like, design, where some of it has to be a little bit more mixed methods and case based, and cannot be purely quantifiable, tangible indices. And I think we're seeing that happen even at the Niti Aayog, where you're having a behavioral sciences team now coming in, and I think working that closely. So that I think is the perspective I'd like to tie it up here. In the interest of time, I have two more questions and then I'll open it up. And this is a question that's probably coming in from the audience as well. Is Dr. Bonu, so many years in the sector, development, one side, monitoring and evaluation, and continuing to be here. What do you think? What do you think skill sets are like? Like, supposing you want to be a professional, not just in development, and you said that anybody needs M&D skill set, but if I'm saying building M&D skill sets, like we're at the ISPP forum here today, and there are development evaluation agencies, there are development schools today, which are talking about it. What skill sets do young people need to work on as they enter the sector? And, you see they should polish and prepare themselves for?
Yeah, I think while there are school, they need to acquire the maximum technical skills that are possible. Some people are very good on qualitative side. Some are have the quantitative bent of mind. So clearly, statistics, then some economics definitely can help, but also supplement it with good computer knowledge. Like even advanced Excel is good. But if you really want to be powerful in influencing, you also need to convert complex data into easily understandable infographics. Because human beings have amazing capacity to understand complex diagrams. Whereas you put it in text, it becomes difficult. So, so that means a little bit of Power BI or Tableau. But if someone is so minimum good Excel knowledge and little bit of Power BI or Tableau if you want to get into good graphics. And if you are more interested in masters, I think some at least one statistics software like Stata or SPS or R. But all these youngsters have to prepare themselves for next 30 years. I'm done. I'm finishing. So I think what I said is fine. I don't know how next 30 years is going to be, but I can understand, how it's going to be. So better be prepared, start learning Python, learn starting R, invest some time. So putting all this together, data sciences are what you see today. Data sciences probably will be 40 or 50 times more important. We will be acquiring more big data sets. So I think that is the direction in which probably I would like to invest. But once you get it, then go work in government setting, at least for a couple of years, just to understand what are public policy issues. There are academic led issues, which are foreign funded programs, largely for international publications. There are also issues which are critical for the poor, for this nation, which you can understand if you are working within the government setting. And so that end-to-end understanding, you have data skills, but you also need to understand what are the right questions that you need to ask. Then figure out, there are a lot of data sets, secondary data sets which are available, which you can do to do opportunistic research. And of course, with your technical knowledge, if occasions come, you can also set up data systems to collect outcomes data and do some research work.
Thank you, sir. Himanshu.
Yeah, I think from a practice, from whatever that I have learned, I think research methods, very critical, theory of change, logical framework, quantitative data collection, qualitative data collections, making the sort of the tools identifying which techniques, sampling, all of that here. Then data management, analysis, interpretation, visualization, some of the things that Dr. Bonu said, learning skills are SPSS, strata, how do you visualize that in infographics? And yeah, I mean, eventually what the clients need are good reports and presentation skills. So, I mean, most of our products are more so English language skills, articulation there, and then these reports have to be presented. So nice, good PowerPoint skills. Again, infographics.
Right.
There are a couple of other things which I think we need to sort of learn around the way, despite whatever that we think and say. M&E professionals will always be considered auditors. And as one of my colleagues once said that an M&E guy is a Kermit de John. So I think something that we have to grow is a thick skin, because I mean, while we were trying to identify outliers or blacks, or sort of spotlighting the blind spots or the black spots or what is not happening, even if we do it as a word that Dr. Bonu used, empathetically, we will always be considered people who are highlighting something that has not gone right. Instead of being considered as partners with whom, if you can collaborate, they can enable achievement of your outcomes and impact in a more sort of collaborative manner, with that learning, with the discussion, interactions that come through. So I think thick skin is something that
yeah, I think we should. Yeah, I guess it is. I mean, so I work with a lot of young people. Some of them are from ISPP who work on my team. And I think one of the things that you see is they will tell me, I can't be diplomatic on this call. And I'm like, okay, you have to be. So, they're upfront. Data said this and I'm going to put it up. And I'm like, no, wait, hold, So it's the entire experience. And that is where I think what Dr. Bonu said makes a lot of difference. Sometimes it's not just the academic side of all these things. And, personally also, I feel like that immersion is so important. You have to spend a little bit time in the field, and it's an investment, and you have to make that investment to do it yourself. Only then you understand both from the government side as well as from maybe an implementing agency side, and that angle is there. And once you put them out in the field, once they understand what that concept is, they automatically learn that part. So I think, organizations or institutions like ISPP need to probably work on that, putting their internships out into the field, like, having, like TIS has a rural immersion program where they make sure that the students are in the rural field. I mean, they choose a location close to them to work. So I think other than the skill sets, and nicely put by Dr. Bonu, like all those skill sets. So I think they're relevant today. They will probably be more relevant in a data analytic world where everything is going to be MIS.
Technology,
so,
technology.
Right.
We have gone from paper-based data collection to
smartphone and drones now.
Yeah, drones and everything. Government has, all departments and ministries have dashboards. 30 years ago, when I started out, there was difficult to find data. Now you can drill down and get a whole kind of data. You have reports that are uploaded on ministry websites, evaluation reports that you can review, that you can learn from. Then as Dr. Bonu said about infographics, you have MyGov, which comes up with so many infographics. You have this other interesting initiative, India in Pixels, which is providing a number of these infographics of all the data that is getting collected. So I think technology is something that is, I think it will be the bedrock of M&E function, planning, monitoring, evaluation, learning function for years ahead. I think there's no running away.
I'm just going to check for a minute. Ashish, is it okay if we go on for a few more minutes for the questions, or are we, because I can see it's on the clock, but so I would have one more question, but I think there are questions on the chat. Let me just pull it up. So one question is, I think, I think it is for Dr. Bonu because about government. It says, can good monitoring and evaluation of government lead to political parties shifting away from vote bank politics? I mean, do you think that M&D is a hurdle to government and thereby they only pick up work that is, which can be marketed? I mean, I think it's a no-brainer question, but in case you want to add a perspective on what it is.
What I have realized is whether it's politicians, whether it is civil servants, whether everyone, agree that we want to do a good job for this nation. Everyone agrees that we need to do a better job for our marginalized communities. So there's no disagreement there. The problem, I think, is we run our systems based on our intuitions, our gut sense, where there are cognitive distortions that take place. And we can give different shades to it. We can say it is political. Of course, there are vested interests. There are many other things that play out. So what I have seen is, if you can collect good quality data, and if you put your arguments, if you allow data to speak for itself, it will depoliticize everything. Only thing is that we need to get that type of compelling data sets to be presented. So I have seen occasions where we just presented the data. We didn't even give any interpretations, because once I start interpreting, then they'll say I am biased in some direction, because let the data speak for itself. So I think if we can get ourselves more data driven, we can convert our society from intuition based to evidence based, but also in the process depoliticize a lot of things that are happening currently. So in that way, M&E is important, but M&E on its own, on a weak data architecture, okay, you are collecting some shoddy data, and you are collecting some outcome data once in 5 years. It is not enough for a large country like ours. We need to have real-time outcomes data, critical data coming in. We need to know how our schools are performing, how our health centers are performing on a real-time basis, and feed them. So to summarize, I think good data can depoliticize a lot of stuff.
Thank you. I think that quite a lot answers the perspective also that we have, right? Data which is verifiable easily. I think the challenge is when data is verifiable, then there's no debate. It's the same data point for you and me. And that's why, as you said, sometimes data just speaks on its own and you don't even need interpretation. There's one more question, and I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'm going to put it out there. Maybe Himanshu, you can try it. It says, in the theme of enterprise promotion, what kind of policy changes does one see from an M&D point of view, M&D and enterprise?
See, I think the government has a fairly huge enterprise development program, whether we're looking at National Rural Livelihood Mission, or we're looking at Startup India. There's a wide variety of enterprise promotion programs. And a lot of these programs obviously developed based on the needs and demands that get not probably through a structured an evaluation exercise or an M&E exercise, but they came out from they were very demand driven, and a number of these programs already have their separate monitoring and evaluation programs. What is getting set up? I mean, if you look at the National Rural Livelihood Mission dashboard, they will talk about the various, how many self-help group members, how many cluster level federations do you have, what are the kind of work they are doing, which states they are, which districts. I mean, there's a wealth of data. Then there's this whole process of process of developing cluster level federation, which is essentially going to be more district level enterprise with a number of members going down to the village level, doing a range of activities. There's a separate activity around process monitoring that the process of establishing the CLFs have to be whatever has been created is followed, and whenever there are state level changes that are there. Similarly, for enterprise development, if you want to do, say, energy efficiency, at enterprises. There's a whole program there with bureaus, enterprise development programs which are there, the elements.
Yeah, I think that's quite a lot of perspective in terms of the opportunities, right? I don't see any more questions. I'm sure we can continue to have that conversation, but in the interest of time, I would like to tie this up. Thank you so much, both of you, for, I guess this is not a topic we can finish in an hour, and there are so many debates that we can continue to have. Hopefully, it helps others understand, look at the perspectives, also see how many challenges are there. And as we said, it's, and like Dr. Bonu, you've been saying, there's a whole side of evaluation, whole side of this entire practice that's coming through on a more humane element, not just on the data element. As much as data is going to take the way forward, it's a lot of mix of the two. I mean, quite a few lessons that you helped us understand today. Look at it, look at what skill sets to acquire at the same time, figure out how we can handle the overall design. Himanshu, thank you for bringing that additional perspective on how evaluations with stories, specifically the experience we have in the field. From not necessarily the government office side, but when we work with funding agencies. And I can tell you from where I stand and work with many of these organizations in building an M&D practice. A lot of my energy is gone in the last 5 years in setting up M&D activity for orgs, because I think very often they don't even know what data looks like. They're like, okay, what data is, what somebody just comes, I ask for a survey form and they fill it out. And so many young orgs, I think I've seen that practice coming in. So they look up, as you said rightly, they pull down reports out of the government portals, out of these development agencies, and come and say, how can we do similar work? And at times it's a lot of investment. So we're going to see that. So thank you both for lending hope, lending a spark that the sector is, on the right track. And I think as when I was at ISPP, I think we're talking about M&D being a career in itself. So, if you really want to build out as in the development space, you can look at M&D in itself as a specialization and work on that, whether it's in a master's degree or PhD or otherwise, but it's an area that you can work with. So thank you everybody for spending this time. I'm really happy to take care.
There's a question from Ashwati. So
I think we already answered Ashwati's question earlier, unless she has another question, which is, she asked the previous question answered.
She says, do we need more M&E agencies in India?
No, that she is answering this question. Ashish, she asked a question on the Q&A page. We took that question up, and this was what she answered after what Dr. Bonu said. That doesn't mean more data agencies. Ashwati, I think the answer was not just more agencies, more data specific work. I think that was the question that I saw. Any follow-on questions, please send it over, on email and we can pick it up. And I'm sure ISPP will organize a follow-on workshop if need be, and we can get the people to come back. I'm not sure I can promise for the others, but I'm still committing that we'll probably come by to listen to a little bit more. Any closing thoughts, Dr. Bonu? Anything that you want to say to the group?
Yeah, this also addresses some of your concerns also, M&D should be not seen as something that we are going to judge. I think we need to sell it more as, your programs are like a pilot intervention. And we need to understand holistically how these pilots are performed. So, so if you want to take these pilots and scale it up in the government system, we need to have a holistic understanding of it. And M&E, I think, is from that perspective. So there's a value for it. So that's one part. The second part, we learn from both success and failures. I think probably we learn more from failures, So as an evaluation person, if you see somewhere things have gone wrong, failed, I think there should not be judgments, but I think we should present it as lessons for the future. And we need to understand stakeholders don't like if they're told, you have failed. But these are very critical lessons. So I think we need to celebrate failure and learn from it. And wherever someone has put some money for M&D, that itself is quite remarkable. So we make best of it, understand from the failure, and make sure that we have a more resilient, robust program and policy for future.
Thank you, sir. Anything from you, Himanshu? Closing.
My
Himanshu.
thoughts are similar to what Dr. Bonu said. I mean, 30, almost 30 years of working in the sector. Yeah, can you hear me properly?
There is a
Am I
little bit of a
audible?
lag. Yeah, there's a little bit of a lag. I
Hello?
think, connection is not.
Is it better now?
Yes, yes. Please go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, my thoughts similar to Dr. Bonu's thoughts. It's a, and for as a practitioner, it's a very interesting field. I've learned so much about sectors that I sort of never imagined I could work on. I've traveled the length and breadth of the country from Nagaland, from sort of a village called Pungro in Nagaland to Dwarka. I have sort of evaluated marsh crocodile hatcheries and evaluated
Himanshu, I think we're again losing your voice. Yeah, now you're completely frozen. All right, I think we will. Ashish, I think we will call it a close. Oh, sorry, Himanshu, you're back.
The education program. I mean, there's a huge the sort of potential and your whole ability to contribute to the development of your own nation.
Right.
Your reports, if they're used.
Yeah, I think I get. I think the feeling there is that
by the agencies, by the client. Is it better now?
Yeah, but I think we
Okay,
lost
so-
you in between. So I'm going to just take the
Okay,
essence
so
of what
I
you
think I
said.
should.
Is that okay? The essence of what you said? Yeah. So I think the whole point here is.
Go on, Archana. I think I'm
Right. So just wanted to say
fine.
thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you so much for what you're saying in terms of understanding travel. I agree. I think I'm with you on it. I spend a lot of my time traveling in the field, and I think as an evaluation person, the most important is please don't sit in your office and make these decisions. You have to get out in the field yourself. And unless you really get your hands into the data, work in the ground with beneficiaries and stakeholders, there is no judgment that you're going to make on. I mean, you're not supposed to make a judgment anyways, but you're anyway not going to be able to add any value. But as I see it, it's a very interesting space. Thank you so much for taking the time on a Saturday evening. I look forward to engaging with you again. And thank you, ISPP, for bringing us together and giving us a chance to discuss something that's close to our hearts. Thanks, Niti. Thanks, Ashish, for
Thank you so much,
coordinating this
Doctor.
for us.
Yeah,
Over
thank you so
to
much,
you.
Dr. Pillai.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shekhar Bonu ji. Thank you so much, Himanshu ji. And ये खत्म करने से पहले मैं एक बात बोलूंगा कि we are also in the लोकनीति course. We have 2 courses, एक data analysis का और project monitoring and evaluation. So these are the 2 courses we taught in the लोकनीति course, लोकनीति program. So bug information you will get on the site. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. Good evening. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.